Get ready to cry, because I've got a list of 10 books that are some of the saddest, most heart-wrenching books I've ever read in my reading journey. So now it's your turn to cry. Get the tissues ready. Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. I'm Ray, What Ray Reads. Follow me on Instagram and What Ray Reads on TikTok as well. Thanks for clicking on the video. The fact that you clicked on it makes me think that maybe you've got some issues that you want to work out, so welcome, because I've got issues as well.
Well, there it is.
So yeah, as a reader, I don't know about you, but sometimes I just enjoy reading a sad book. Sometimes I'm looking for a book that's gonna break me heart, a book that's gonna make me cry. Is that illegal? Is that so wrong that I want a book to emotionally destroy me? I guess you be the judge of that. Is it sadistic or is it cathartic? No, seriously though, I do think there's something quite cathartic about reading an emotional story or a book that really makes you empathise with a character or the person's situation, especially in this day and age. So I see it more as a catharsis. And to be honest, I think a lot of people could work on their empathy in today's day and age. So they're the people who need to watch this video. If the lighting's just slightly changed, it's because I closed the blinds because I was being blinded. But there's another disclaimer I'd like to make. I haven't read A Little Life. So if you're going to come on here and be like,
Rachel, A Little Life's the best book ever and that's the saddest book.
Perhaps it may be true, but I haven't read it yet. She is on the shelf over there, but in all honesty, I'm kind of scared to read it. Because everyone's always crying, they're saying they're emotionally devastated.
I'm not even 300 pages into this book.
So I will get to it, but calm down, because I haven't read it yet, okay? Anyway, I'll stop rambling on and we'll get into the books. I'm just gonna have a sip of tea first. Ow, that's hot. So the first book on the list is the most recent book that really emotionally devastated me, and that is Damon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. I'd heard that this book was sad, but I don't think I was quite prepared to be so moved by a character. So this book's a retelling of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, which I haven't read, but you don't really need to have read it. It's just sort of taken the premise of that story and modernising it in a sense. And this tells the story of Damon, or his nickname Demon, who's born into poverty in Appalachia in rural southern America, Virginia to be precise. And the story's told from his point of view from the moment he's born. Quite literally, the first line of the book was "First I got myself born," and we follow him through childhood into adolescence as he's navigating his life. The growing up in poverty and his mother's battling addiction, involved with a series of seedy, awful boyfriends, and ultimately he ends up in the care system. And the book tackles a lot in a very tender way. So we're dealing with the point of view of a child and how he sees addiction, abuse, the effects of the opioid crisis in rural America, and also in his daily life, being in the care system and how that makes you feel, and just how poverty and addiction ravages a child's sense of self, and how a child can feel no sense of security in that world. I think the book handled this really well because I'm someone who, I have mentioned briefly before, I was in foster care and I grew up around similar circumstances that are touched upon in the book, and I think it's dealt with very genuinely with empathy and care. I will say reading about these topics from the point of view of a child can be quite difficult to get through at times because he handles things with such innocence. He doesn't really understand, but then he also grows up too quick and he understands things he shouldn't be understanding as a child, and he basically becomes a parentified child, and we follow him essentially raising himself with little or no input or real love. But in my opinion, this book is perfection, and I can't quite remember the time that I felt this deeply connected and impacted by a character. I felt protective and and I just really loved the character and I wanted to protect him at all costs. So I will warn you that this book is quite heavy, but it's also a coming of age, and you're on the journey with Damon, and there is sort of lightness in there as well, which is a testament to Barbara Kingsolver's writing. And I do believe not only has she written an amazing book, but she seems to be an amazing person as well, because with the proceeds of the money that she got from the book, she opened up a detox centre or a rehab of sorts in the area that she writes about, which is more than most authors or celebrities can say about what they do with the power, the privilege and the platform they have.
She's got a point.
I'll be screaming about this book forever, go read it. Next is another book I read fairly recently, and that is Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. I listened to this on audiobook because the film recently came out, and I try and watch all the Oscar nominated Best Pictures. This is nominated for Best Picture, but I wanted to read the book first because I find it really impacts my ability to imagine the characters if I do it the other way round. I like to paint the picture myself, okay? So this book is about race in America and how black boys and men are treated in these establishments and how horrific abuse is allowed to flourish and go unchecked in these institutions. Based on a true story of a reform school in Florida in the 1960s, we follow Elwood Curtis, a gifted young student who's about to head off to university until he encounters someone and gets essentially mistaken for being involved in something he had no input in. He's basically in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he ultimately gets sent to reform school, altering his life forever. Whilst there, he's exposed to horrific abuse and people who don't actually care about helping young people get on the right path. They just care about power and control, and it really highlights the evil that seeps through these places and the people that are at the top. He befriends another boy who's there, who's kind of like his opposite, and they develop a close bond and friendship, and they're basically each other's support system in there. And the book shifts between different time periods and explore how trauma continues throughout a person's life, and it'll stay with them forever. And I thought this book was really shocking, gripping. The characters really jumped off the page. They were very engaging, written in such a precise way, because it's not a particularly long book either, but it really highlights the importance of friendship and dreams against the backdrop of a cruel period and stain on American history. Go read it and then watch the film. Next is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. So this is a memoir by the lead singer of the band Japanese Breakfast, who you might be familiar with. In the book, she explores her life being a Korean American, growing up between the two worlds, one parent's from Korea and one parent's American, and she grows up living a life that her parents didn't live, in relative middle class security. But she explores her complex relationship with her parents, specifically her mother, as her mother gets diagnosed with terminal cancer and she's there caring for her mother, using food to explore her heritage and a connection to her mother's culture. This is a deeply emotional, heartbreaking story of loss and death, and how it can make us see things in a new light. So something that you may be wanting to escape when you're younger, but then at times like these, you sort of run towards it and want to know more about it. She's discovering more of who her mother was and getting a sense of appreciation for her mother and what she had to do coming to a whole new country, learning the language alone. And unfortunately, that's juxtaposed with the sadness of the loss and the grief. This is an incredible book, and I'd heard amazing things about it, but I don't think I was really quite ready for how moving it was. And I think it'll really make you question your own relationship and appreciation for family members or friends in your own life. It's deeply moving and intimate, and Michelle exposes very small, intimate last moments with her mother in the book. And when you're reading it, you can really tell it was like a sort of exercise in catharsis for her. You'll cry, but it'll be worth it for an amazing book. Next is On the Savage Side by Tiffany McDaniel, a book that left me staring at the wall in disbelief and just completely shattered after I read it. This is a beautiful book that follows similar themes to Damon Copperhead. It's set in a rural town in America. The characters grow up in poverty and are surrounded by addiction, and how that sort of infiltrates its different generations, but it's also loosely based on a true story of the unsolved murders of 6 women in rural Ohio, and they're referred to as the Chillicothe Six, told from the point of view of 2 twin sisters, Arcade and Daffodil, who live with the mother and the grandmother and are facing the realities of poverty and addiction, but there's still the magic of childhood and exploration and freedom that you feel. This was really a story of family ties and generational trauma and how it follows from one parent to child, and it'll continue if it's not dealt with. As we follow the twins from childhood into their early adult years, the harshness of the world and the lives unfold, and they're exposed to and pulled into a world of danger, drugs, and where women go missing and are never seen again. This book shattered me. I don't use that word lightly. I was literally crying at the end. The bond between the sisters is really the driving force of the story. Again, you find yourself feeling protective over them and you just want to steer them in the right direction. But I do think the most impactful part of the book's towards the end, when the reality of the fact that this is based on a real story and these somewhat fictionalised characters are loosely based off real people and what happened to them. It simply needs to be read. I also will just give a trigger warning for anyone reading this book that it does deal with themes of childhood SA, so I think that's kind of important to mention. Yeah, just handle that with sensitivity and care. Next we have Heaven by Maiko Kawakami. I've mentioned before, but this is the author that got me into translated fiction, and I absolutely love her writing and books. This is a story about 2 classmates who find a connection with each other and understanding when they're both facing bullying at school, explored through the character of Eyes, who is constantly mocked and relentlessly bullied for having a lazy eye. He befriends Kojima, a young girl who is also dealing with a similar situation in school. They don't fit in, but with each other they find a connection and a bond. And this book is a harsh psychological look at the impact of bullying, how children use power and dominance to pick on other children, and how these incidents are oftentimes brushed off as just kids being kids, but they'll severely impact the person who's on the receiving end of it for the rest of their lives. And there are truly some harrowing scenes in this, and I was absolutely shocked by sort of the cruelty of children. But then as I get older, I'm like, you know what, children, they're just so cruel sometimes. Again, I wanted to get in the book and start defending people. Say that again. It asks questions of power, social hierarchies that we sort of allow to go unchecked in society, and we kind of even encourage. I will say that the book will just simply make you hate teenagers, so if you want to get into translated fiction, this is a great place to start too. Next is another translated fiction book, and that is Almond by Sohn Won-pyung. Again, another book that focuses on a young protagonist that is different and stands out in society. The fact that he is different makes him a target. I'm pretty sure this book is categorised as YA, but it certainly doesn't read in that sense. I think the voice of the young person is just captured very precisely and handled well. We follow a young boy who he has a condition called alexithymia, which makes it difficult for him to feel emotions and danger, and he relies on his strong bond with his mother and grandmother to sort of keep him safe in the world and keep him away from danger. And he lives with them above a small used bookstore, and this becomes his safe space for a life that he kind of finds difficult to navigate. One day a terrible incident happens, and his relationship and his security that he finds from his mother and grandmother is thrown up into turmoil, and it makes him have to become the leader of his own life, but ultimately becomes a target again for school bully. But because of his condition, he doesn't see the danger of sort of standing up for himself, so they kind of butt heads, but then he gets a bit of respect from him in a weird way, and they develop an unlikely friendship. But I really loved this books focus on a character that has to learn how to navigate out in the world and how important family bonds and connections are, especially for people who are different. And it makes you more empathetic for people who see the world differently as well. This is a really quick read, so you'll get through it super quick. Next is another memoir, and that is The Glass Castle by Jeanette. This is one of the first memoirs I read when I was getting into reading in my early 20s, and I still think about it all the time. It's still one of my favourite books that I've ever read, and I'm noticing actually a theme here in the books that seem to emotionally destroy me.
Trauma.
And the books that deal with the point of view of a child and how they have to sort of navigate things and emotions as they get older. And now I'm just realising,
trauma.
Back to the book. This is the story of a complex family dynamic, and we follow journalist Jeanette Walls as she looks back on her childhood and a relationship with her, how would we say it, unusual parents, from being raised in a somewhat nomadic family, constantly travelling to different places, living largely without indoor plumbing and constantly on the move. Her parents didn't believe in regular ways of the world, education, going to school, setting down roots and having stability for the children. And although they taught them certain aspects of life that would come in useful, they essentially left the children to raise themselves and each other, and the mother never really felt the maternal instincts, and they wanted to kind of follow their interests and passions first and foremost. And the father was battling alcoholism as well, and like most, he was wonderful until he drank. And we follow them from the childhood up until they leave home and go out to try and make a better life for themselves. And looking back, Walls has a lot of sympathy for her parents. I didn't. Sorry, I didn't have sympathy for her parents at all. They literally neglected the children. But it's such a touching story about family bonds, how important it is for children to have an education and be able to go out in the world on their own. The support system to allow them to fail and always have that security there is just incredibly important. So yeah, read the book, it's really great. Next is Against the Loveless World by Susan Abulhawa. This is a poignant story of a Palestinian refugee, Nahir, who's displaced during the Gulf War, and we follow her early life in Kuwait and Jordan to her later years in Palestine as she follows the people she meets and the losses and loves that happen throughout her life, all under Israeli occupation. This story is told in a somewhat non-linear narrative and it jumps back and forth a bit, but we explore the different facets of Nahir's life as she struggles with the psychological and traumatic impacts of displacement and occupation. This ends up leading Nahir to join a resistance group, but it ultimately has dire consequences. And I read this at a time when we were seeing firsthand through our phone screens the realities of occupying a people and a land. So it really touched me in a very profound way. And this book reads like an epic, and the characters are so rich and vivid. I definitely needed a few days to decompress after reading this and just sitting with what I'd read. But I think if you wanted to read more Palestinian narratives or stories set in that part of the world, this is a great place to start with. Next is The Vegetarian by Han Kang. I've recommended this book quite a bit over the last year, but that's just because it had a really profound impact on me, so you're getting recommended it again. And I didn't really know what to expect with this. I went in quite blind. I listened to it on audiobook and it just really touched me with the aspects of control, dominance, society trying to keep women down.
Not on my watch!
And also mental health. It really handled it in a very beautiful way. This is the story of a woman who one day chooses to no longer eat meat, and in Korean society that's very unusual, and her husband and family, especially a father, really don't like that she's asserted her own power on this one little thing, and they try and use their patriarchal power to dominate her and sort of push her down and belittle what she's doing. But it really shows a bigger hand of societal standards and expectations for women especially in Korean culture. And Han Kang really captures how women in Korea often feel like they have a lack of autonomy over their own lives because of these strong traditional and also patriarchal views and expectations of what they're supposed to be as a wife, mother, housewife. But constantly telling someone not to behave in the most truthful and authentic way will have dire psychological and physical consequences on the person, because it is a person beneath this decision you don't like. And I think the book really handled very well mental health and how it doesn't just impact the individual's life, it will impact the surrounding family as well. But how difficult that can be when you're just trying to navigate daily living. I was just really blown away by this book and what it captured in a truly unique way, and I was just incredibly moved from start to finish. I also thought the book, especially audio, because I listened to it, was acted really well on audio, so if you wanted to listen to the audio, I highly recommend it. And again, I will just give a trigger warning for this one, that there's a lot of stuff that deals with SA and consent, so it can be very heavy at times, so just be wary of this when you go in and make sure you're ready to read about those type of topics. And finally, we've got Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is another memoir and a really gut punch of a memoir. And if you're not familiar, Chanel Miller is the young woman who went viral for her sexual assault case in 2015 after she was sexually assaulted at a party at Stanford University, and it went really viral online, specifically on Twitter, especially after the perpetrator was given such a light slap on the wrist sentence. But we follow Chanel Miller's life, and she takes control of the narrative, talking about what her life was like before, leading up to the assault, and also how the fallout and aftermath, attention and backlash of her being a victim of someone else's crime against her and her body, and just how that has a deeply profound impact on her and her mental health. And she writes with such tenderness and openness, very vulnerable on the page, about a really horrific, painful time in her life. And she also touches on how creativity really helped her and her family, a circle. It really solidifies her in this story she was lost in at the beginning. She was just Jane Doe at the beginning, but she takes control of this story that is her life. Although what she's writing about's awful, upsetting and shocking, it's also a beautiful memoir. But I would say it's a very important book that I think everyone should read. And it's always important to remember there's a real person behind these viral moments, and it's just inspiring how Chanel Miller has chosen to reclaim the narrative and how this book will help others as well. So yeah, they're the books. They're the sad books, the ones that will make you cry, the ones that will make you question your life, the ones you'll need 3 to 5 business days to recover from. Hopefully there's something there that you like the sound of or that you're going to check out. But if you've already read them, let me know some recommendations of books that you find deeply moving and made you emotional. If you like the video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, because it helps the channel out, and also you do get icon status, remember. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.